Some of the most famous TV shows of all time are about sports, and I love sports, but I've only ever watched 2 shows about them. So today, my goal is to find the #1 sports show of all time. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, I must watch the 5 highest rated sports shows on IMDb. Rule number 2, I can only watch the first episode. And rule number 3, I must create a top 5 ranking and declare a winner. We're starting with the 5th highest rated show, Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. Winning Time is one of the most interesting sports stories I've ever heard. It's a dramatized retelling of how the 1980s Los Angeles Lakers became one of the greatest dynasties in basketball history and revolutionized the game both on and off the court. The pilot opens at a doctor's office in 1991 Los Angeles. We see a 31-year-old Magic Johnson, a global superstar at the time, sneaking out the back door so nobody sees him and his manager. But as they get ready to drive off, the manager suddenly breaks into tears, and Johnson in the passenger seat has a 1,000-yard stare. Basketball fans will likely know the significance of this scene, but for those who aren't, like me, the show gives you all the clues you need. You can tell this guy is famous, he's a Lakers basketball player, and he just got some really bad news of the doctors. But I still had to look up and confirm what exactly just happened, which was Johnson received an HIV diagnosis, which basically was the death sentence of the time. And it was days before Magic Johnson would announce this and his retirement from the NBA to the world. I'm giving the opening scene a 7 out of 10 because it tells you this is going to be a smart, well-acted show, and it acts as a decent hook to the rest of the show, which is, how did the rise and the fall of Magic Johnson happen? We see it all started in 1979 with one man, Dr. Jerry Buss. The show's smartest move is making Buss, not basketball, the focus of the story. In the first episode, he was the best and most interesting character by far. He's a self-made millionaire who has zero background in sports, but he possesses a radical visionary belief that basketball could be transformed into a Hollywood-style entertainment spectacle, a concept that would eventually become known as the Showtime era. So he sells everything he owns to bet it all on his purchase of the Lakers. John C. Reilly expertly plays the charming, reckless, and highly entertaining Jerry Buss, and the rest of the cast is great too. But there was one thing I didn't like about the pilot, which was the director frequently forces Jerry Buss to break the fourth wall and speak directly to the camera. In the beginning, this feels like a lazy tool to provide exposition, but when it happens again later in the episode, it took me completely out of the show. Because before this, the show establishes a serious tone with good dramatic scenes, but then it undercuts that with these out-of-place fourth wall breaks. But despite this, the episode manages to lay out a story so interesting that even a total non-basketball fan like me was hooked. So for that reason, I'm giving it 1 thumb up, which currently puts it in first place on our #1 best sports show ranking. Our next show is the 4th highest rated on our list, and it's my favorite show of all time, Cobra Kai.
Get the hell out of here, loser.
Cobra Kai is one of the most underrated shows of all time. And the reason I think that is, whenever I tell someone it's my favorite show and they should watch it, they always look at me like I'm crazy. They'll ask me, "Are you serious?" So then I tell them, "Quiet!" But every single time someone has taken my advice and actually watched it, they loved it. And that's because it's the redemption arc no one saw coming. Imagine one day you're the coolest kid in school and a karate champion, but the next day you've lost it all. This is the story of Johnny Lawrence, the villain in the classic 80s movie The Karate Kid. But Johnny actually goes from being the villain in the movie to the hero in Cobra Kai. From beating up nerds in high school to teaching them karate 33 years later. It's a sequel told entirely from the villain's point of view, but you don't have to know anything about the movie before watching it, because the opening scene gives you all the context you need. We are taken back in time to 1984, when history changed forever. The world had its eyes on Los Angeles, California. No, not for the Summer Olympics, but something far bigger. The All-Valley Under-18 Karate Tournament. It was no surprise that the 2-time defending champion, Johnny Lawrence, had made it to the finals again. His opponent, newcomer Daniel LaRusso, LaRusso, who had only started learning karate a few months earlier. Johnny was the clear favorite, but despite all odds, Daniel pulled out the W with one legendary kick.
It was an illegal kick.
And Johnny is left face down on the floor, defeated. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but this one kick would change the lives of both characters forever. Fast forward 33 years later to present day. The show opens with Johnny asleep in his bed, still in that same face down position from that fateful day. And I love this transition because it shows you Johnny never really recovered from that loss. 33 years later, he's still metaphorically knocked down in life and hasn't gotten back up yet. I have watched this opening scene so many times, and I love it because it tells you everything you need to know about the movie and how Johnny's life has gone since then in just 3 minutes, and without a single word of dialogue. So it should be no surprise that I'm giving the opening scene a 10 out of 10. The rest of the episode continues to paint Johnny as a sympathetic figure, especially compared to his much more successful rival, Daniel LaRusso, and it makes you want to root for this flawed, troubled character who's trying to turn his life around. There are so many good scenes that it's hard for me to choose my favorite. My top 3 include when Johnny beats up some high school bullies, when he has a traumatic flashback of the worst day of his life, and the ending when he decides to reopen the famous Cobra Kai dojo and we hear the epic Chicago Bulls theme song. From just the first episode alone, you can see what makes this show so great. It's funny, the writing is surprisingly good. There are several very good character arcs, the best of all being Johnny's, who is expertly played by William Zabka. The 80s inspired score is awesome, the show is cheesy but in a good way, and of course the karate scenes are badass. But maybe most of all, I love how it took what was a pretty good movie in The Karate Kid and elevated it with this very good sequel, which is something that other franchises have struggled with. When I first watched this show, I was shocked by how good it was. I think you will be too. So I might be biased, but I'm giving the pilot 2 thumbs up, which puts it ahead of Winning Time in first place on our number 1 best sports show ranking. Cobra Kai is going to be hard to beat, but we still have 3 shows to go, including Apple TV's most popular show of all time. But first, our next show is the 3rd highest rated on our list, and it's one I've always wanted to watch, Friday Night Lights.
I expect you boys to execute. Expect you boys to play football. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
Some people claim Friday Night Lights is the best sports show of all time. It follows the lives of the Dillon Panthers, a top-tier high school football team and their head coach. And the opening scene tells us this by doing something that I thought was very clever, by delivering the exposition through a local radio talk show. We hear that the host and the people calling in are all talking about football, but not professional football or even college football. They are talking about their local high school football team, the Dillon Panthers, about how everyone is looking forward to the big season opening game on Friday night, about how they have this new coach who people aren't sure about, and about all the pressure he's under to win them championships. Because he is coaching the number 1 high school football team in Texas, which means he even has the local news covering his team's preseason. So in just a minute, this scene makes it very clear. This high school football team is the most important thing to the people in this town. Friday Night Lights delivers exposition in a subtle, natural way, which was an immediate signal to me that this was going to be a good show. In addition, I thought the opening scene did a good job at quickly introducing all the main characters and their different personalities, but also teasing their character arcs to make you want to keep watching. So overall, I'm giving the opening scene an 8 out of 10. I thought the rest of the pilot was also very good. It makes it clear that the most compelling part of the show isn't the football. It's the personal lives of the players, the coach, and everyone else in this town supporting the team. But what I found most interesting was how it transports you into this football-obsessed town with a completely different way of life. And it makes you realize just how seriously everyone takes this game. And it gives you an appreciation for the massive amount of pressure this high school team is under. But to me, the thing that takes this show from being a good to a great premise is the twist that happens at the end of the pilot. Spoilers. The The team has this star quarterback who is the best in the country. Notre Dame is looking at him for college, and he's also the nicest guy ever. But in the first game of the season, the show decides to paralyze him in a freak football accident. And even though I saw this injury coming from a mile away, it was still a very powerful moment. Then the team has no choice but to throw in this nobody backup quarterback who never plays, and he surprises everyone by winning the game. Without this injury, the show would have been generic and boring. But now it asks the question, how does this town deal with this devastating loss? Which sets up the rest of the series very nicely. Overall, this seems like a very good show and I will definitely keep watching. So I'm giving the pilot 2 thumbs up. And as much as I love the pilot of Cobra Kai, I think most people will like the pilot of Friday Night Lights more, which is why I'm putting it ahead of Cobra Kai in first place on our #1 best sports show ranking. Our next show is the second highest rated on our list, and it's probably not what you expect. Heated Rivalry.
You will not be so nice when we beat you.
That's not happening.
See you in final.
This show was one of the surprise new hits of 2025. I never watched it because I'm not into romance shows and I'm definitely not the target audience. But its elite 8.7 IMDb rating had me curious. So I wanted to see if it was actually as good as people say. It's about 2 rival hockey stars at the top of their game who face an unexpected challenge when they develop feelings for each other, complicating their careers and the sport's expectations. In the opening scene, we see when the 2 main characters meet for the first time. They have a quick exchange and we already start to see their different personalities. The Canadian Hollander is the rule follower and the Russian Rozanov is the rule breaker, but they are both extremely competitive. Their 2 teams play each other, but ultimately Russia wins. And as the team shakes hands, Rozanov says to Hollander, "See you at the draft," referring to the upcoming Major League Hockey draft. Did this opening scene hook me? No, I thought it was boring. But there were a few things I thought it did well. In a romance show, I imagine you want your 2 love interests to meet as soon as possible, which this scene does. And I did like how we hear 2 sports broadcasters talking about the characters as we see them practice. This helps build them up and give us context. However, as someone who watches my fair share of sports, these guys did not sound like pundits at all. At least none that I've ever heard, which made the show feel a bit cheap. So overall, I'm giving the opening scene a 6 out of 10. After this, I thought the rest of the episode was surprisingly good, except for one scene which I'll get to in a minute. The pilot focuses on the rookie year of both characters now that they are in the NHL on different teams. The 2 lead actors are good and their chemistry is undeniable, and I was surprised by how invested I was in these characters already, given it was only the first episode. I quickly felt bad for them as I learned more about their family lives and individual problems. The biggest being the added pressure they deal with for being a gay male professional athlete in the early 2000s. As a big soccer fan, I am aware that there are only a handful of openly gay male active professional soccer players today. And apparently, the NHL has never had an openly gay active player. So I think this is an interesting issue to cover in a TV show. But there was one scene in the pilot that I did not like, and that was the first sex scene, which was 8 minutes long and very explicit. The point of this scene was to further the development of these 2 characters. We need to see that Rozanov is more experienced, that Hollander is not, so he's hesitant, and that the 2 slowly become closer and strengthen their relationship over time. But did this scene need to be 8 minutes long? I don't think so. I thought it was the least interesting part of the episode, and if you replace them with 2 women or a man and a woman, I would say the exact same thing, which is the scene completely stops the momentum of what was an otherwise interesting story, and it trades this momentum for the indulgence of a steamy sex scene. Sure, there are plenty of sex scenes in other popular HBO shows too, but those scenes are not nearly as long, and that's probably for a reason, but this is just my opinion. I know this show is based on a romance novel, so I'm sure fans love this. Still, overall, the pilot did just enough to make me want to keep watching, so I'm giving it 1 thumb up, and I'm putting it above Winning Time in 3rd place on our #1 best sports show ranking. Our next and final show is the highest rated on our list, and it's possibly the most feel-good show of all time, Ted Lasso.
Doesn't surprise me though, you've had a heck of a career.
Thank you. Never thought it would end being coached by Ronald fucking McDonald.
You might not know this, but the idea for Ted Lasso actually came from a commercial. In 2012, NBCU acquired the exclusive United States media rights to the Premier League. So ahead of the next season, NBCU created a promotional commercial to advertise this. It featured Jason Sudeikis as Ted Lasso, this over-the-top, folksy American football coach who was unexpectedly hired to manage Tottenham Hotspur, a soccer team in London. The commercial goes viral and is a huge success. And a few years later, it's turned into a show with the same premise. An American college football coach, Ted Lasso, is hired to manage AFC Richmond, a struggling English soccer club, and must win over skeptical players, staff, and fans. In the opening scene, we meet Rebecca. She just became the new owner of AFC Richmond as part of a divorce settlement with her unfaithful ex-husband, Rupert. And knowing how much Rupert loved the club, she now plans to drive the franchise into the ground to spite him. So she fires the team's manager and hires Ted Lasso instead, hoping he would become an embarrassing disaster. I like the opening scene for a few reasons, and those are, it got to the show's inciting event as quickly as possible. It already shows you that Ted Lasso is the nicest guy ever, and it was filled with plenty of examples of subtle, smart humor, which to me tells me this is a high-quality show that respects the audience. So I'm giving the opening scene a 7 out of 10. The rest of the episode introduces you to the supporting cast, which is full of memorable, distinct characters, and even the minor characters are great too. But the star of the show is Ted. He's funny, endearing, and his infectious positivity makes him and the show impossible not to love. My favorite scene was at the end of the episode when Ted was talking to his wife on the phone. Ted has just finished his first day at his new job, and people were mean to him all day long because everyone thinks he's this big joke and they all want him to fail, even the person who hired him. In the beginning, Ted comes across as this goofy simpleton who's completely out of his depth. So when people call him names like
Ronald fucking McDonald,
you laugh. But that changes with the phone call to his wife. After a hard day, all Ted wants to do is talk to his wife and his son to help lift his spirits. But this is when we learn that, despite his positive demeanor, Ted has problems of his own. Problems with his marriage. His wife recently told him she needed space, which is why Ted moved to London in the first place. So now he's all alone in a different country, and he's dealing with his marriage issues and the stressful new job where no one likes him. But despite this, somehow he still maintains his unbreakable positive attitude throughout the day. In just one scene, Ted goes from being a caricature and the butt of every joke to someone we feel bad for and want to succeed, which acts as a powerful end to the first episode. And it's a great preview of what makes this show so special. Overall, I'm giving the pilot 2 thumbs up, and I'm putting it above Heated Rivalry in 3rd place on our #1 best sports show ranking. And in 1st place, the #1 sports show of all time, based on its first episode, is Friday Night Lights. That's all for this episode. Until next time, watch better shows.